We have the quorum. Let's call the meeting to order. This is going to be a long meeting. Apart from discussing items on the agenda up front, starting from 4:25, we will hold a public hearing. And if everything goes smoothly, we will have the meeting adjourned at 6:30 p.m. So, confirmation of minutes of the last meeting. Up to now, we haven't received any proposed amendments for the minutes. So I believe that these can be endorsed. And then information papers issued since last meeting. No paper has been received so far. So we will proceed with our work as scheduled. The next meeting will be held on the 24th of February after the Lunar New Year. So can we invite the administration team to join us? There will be two items to be discussed. One is the provision of sewerage network in Mayaotong village in Shangquanho and food waste and collection and delivery arrangements. Members, do you have any views on this? If not, then these two items will be discussed. So we're waiting for the administration team to come in. The first item is rather a light one, is the creation of a permanent directorate post to oversee district cooling system projects, DCS projects. After the government team has been settled, then we will ask them to walk us through the paper, and then we will be talking as the next item, further measures to improve air quality, part 2. And that will be from 3:35 to 4:25. So I'll hand over the floor to the government team, Mr. Pt1, PAS. Or is it Mr. Sit? So let me spend, say, 4 to 5 minutes to brief you on the paper. So we are proposing that under the EOO, Energy Efficiency Office of the EMSD, a creation of a CSB engineer post be established to support and strengthen the management of DCS projects, and to also to cope with the extra workload in relation to ENC, ongoing energy efficiency and conservation. In 2018 policy address, the government said that it would study the provision of DCS in NDAs in redevelopment areas. It is a very energy efficient air conditioning system, and we can save energy. So implementing DCS can help with our emission work. So the government will take for the work in full steam. In the Tung Chung New Town Extension, Kutong North, Hong Shui Kiu, we have plans to build DCS. The DCS are large-scale infrastructure projects involving complex works and long implementation timeframe to tie in with the development of NDAs. The EOO has taken on many new ENC initiatives, and we have expanded the scope of our work, so our workload has increased substantially. In the next few years, the EOO will see an increase in the workload to support the ENB's policy initiatives and RE renewable energy initiatives. And the EOO has already started taking on the new initiatives, including the Green Energy Target and Green School 2.0. And we also have plans to further implement energy-saving measures for government buildings. The EOO is now manned by 2 chief engineers, and their workload is already very onerous, and they can't deal with extra workload. So the same goes for other chief engineers in the EMSD. So there is a need for us to create an CBSE post. So he will be responsible for taking up the extra workload for initiatives outlined in the policy address. So if we get your support, then we will also be restructuring the EOO to enhance our work efficiency and effectiveness. So I appeal to member support for our proposal. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sit, for your briefing. 2 members would like to ask questions. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok and Mr. Wu Chi Wai. 4 minutes, including questions and answers. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. I speak in support of the EMSD's proposal to create this chief engineer post. In fact, in the Kai Tak New Development Area, there is the DCS. The project has not been completed yet, and for parts completed, they are already in operation. And I'm chairman of the relevant bill studying the relevant regulations, so I'm familiar with the project. And the PWSC has also conducted a site visit to Kai Tak. And what is most interesting is that one of the schools has subscribed to the system, and the principal and the teachers are very happy, very satisfied with the system. And a primary school student, a girl, she is the ambassador to brief us on how they use the system. And during the visit, this ambassador did a briefing, and she did it very well. So apart from being an environmental friendly facility, it can also serve as publicity and education purposes. So I remember that very vividly. Of course, some of the projects have already been commissioned. And in Kai Tak, we have a clear policy saying that all public facilities, hospitals and schools must subscribe to the system. But as to whether the energy saving target can be achieved vis-a-vis the other cooling systems, and that is we can save up to 1/4 to 1/5 of the energy. So maybe the director can brief us. Now, in Appendix 4, we have the restructured organization chart, and the chief engineer will have to have several aspects of work. First of all, is dealing with the DCS in Kai Tak, Tung Chung New Town Extension, Kwun Tong North, and Hong Shui Q projects feasibility study will be under his ambit. So I'd like to ask whether the government has a policy that as long as there is an NDA planned, the DCS will also be built. In fact, in many parts of the world, there are similar systems. Famous cities also have such systems installed. And if it is near river water, on sea water, it is more efficient, and it can achieve the various benefits mentioned in the paper, like reducing heat island effects, and also individual buildings do not have to provide for so much space to build their own air conditioning systems. Director, thank you, Dr. Lo, for your question. In fact, when DCS was commissioned gradually in Kai Tak, the energy saving effect is very obvious. In the past 2 years, we have saved 19 million kilowatts of electricity for Hong Kong in the past 2 years. And we hope that once more commercial buildings are connected, the energy saving effectiveness can be more obvious. And Dr. Lo mentioned to Kai Tak, this is a pilot scheme. It's been very successful. And we have made a decision that for all NDAs, we will consider building DCS as a means of providing cooling and chilling. We would also have regard to the long-term cost effectiveness and also the local conditions, whether they are suited to building DCS. We'll have all kinds of considerations. So generally, all the NDAs, for all NDAs, we will consider building DCS. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. We need a staff member to oversee the building of many DCS in the future. But as to whether there is a need to create a permanent position, I have a lot of question marks. I agree that when the projects are being taken forward in full steam, of course, somebody has to be taking charge of the projects. But in the long term, is there a need for a permanent post? And my personal view is that the administration should consider this whether a permanent post is needed. Rather, maybe you can request for a supernumerary post instead. There are two major tasks for this post holder: is following up on the DCS system, and the other is about the restructuring of the EEO. I have read the paper. You have talked about some restructuring directions. Since the inception of the EEO, what has been the effectiveness of the office? Should there be an overall review of the efficiency of the office before you come and ask for a post to be added? Now, this post holder will take forward two tasks, to take forward DCS in NDAs, and then he should also conduct a review of the EOO. So when the post expires, then he can come up with the review results, and then if needed, he can come and ask for a permanent post. So value for money is what he's emphasizing, and there should not be duplication of structure. So how do you make of it, Director? Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your question. The DCS is a long-term project which requires long-term planning and implementation. We talk about three areas: Kutong North, Tongchong, and Hongshui-Q. The work will start in 2021 when the new towns and its facilities are being commissioned in phases. Now, by 2031 in Kutong, Tongchong 2030, and Hongshui-Q, the project will last up to 2037 to 38. So that's for a long period of time in the future that this post holder will have to be involved in the planning, and he will also be looking after the consultant's work. We can consider a supernumerary post. So given that the long-term planning required, a permanent post may be considered. Mr. Wu talks about how do we assess the effectiveness of the work of the EOO. Let me cite an example. In the past years, well, let's use 2005 as a benchmark. Hong Kong's energy intensity has been decreased by 30%. And our goal is that by 2025, the figure can reach 40%. And it's not easy to come by. We need all members of the public to be involved. And starting from 1994, the EOA has been embarking on a lot of education and publicity work. And we have also enacted the legislation, including energy efficiency label, and also building efficiency regulations and so on. Through all these, we can achieve a synergy effect. And so the public can work together with us to save energy. Now, if you ask me how to measure the effectiveness of the EOO's work, the best way to do it is to look at the energy saving target that we have achieved. So we have achieved a 30% reduction. Mr. Tony Chair, thank you, Chairman. Of course, in terms of energy saving and conservation and improving energy efficiency, I support devoting more resources, including manpower. But I would like to find out more about DCS. It says that it involves complex works, and phased implementation is also involved. And it says that the surface life of DCS will be 30 years. Let me explain a bit more clearly. What kind of concept is that 30 years? Well, the projects will be commissioned in phases. So what does that mean? Does it mean that part of the project will come to the end of its surface life, and while other parts have not come to the end of surface life, or what? So we're talking about a permanent post, so this person should take forward the work on an ongoing basis. So, Director, can you explain more on this? Now, EOO has an onerous workload. We talk about the green energy target. Of course, in 2019, for government buildings, the electricity consumption has been reduced, and your target is a reduction of 5%, and you said that you are almost reaching your goal. Or maybe you have surpassed your goal even. And then you said in the coming 5 years, there will be improved in the use of energy, and that a 6% figure is projected. So does it mean that you will add 1% to the 5%, or you will add 6% on top of the 5%? And you talk about 14 million, and also you spend $4 to $5 million each year. So what kind of work are you actually doing here? Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. Green energy target. From 2015 to 2020, we have set the target to reduce electricity consumption in government buildings by 5% in 5 years. And up to 2019, we have reached that target already, 5%. And we expect that we can even surpass the target. Now, after the 5-year plan has expired, what is the way forward? In the coming 5 years, we would be reducing electricity consumption by 6%. That is from 5% plus 1% is 6%.
So that's actually a bold initiative. We will not stop at electricity, but all government buildings, including gas, LPG, they're part of energy and be incorporated as part of the energy target. So we are expanding the range. Gas is included on top of electricity. And the government buildings green energy target also cover government infrastructure projects, including the building of bridges and roads. So they will be under the target as well. For your information, Hong Kong government's energy use actually cover half of it is coming from the government buildings, and the other half comes from our infrastructure, sewage system, and so forth. So 6% means a broader coverage, and we've also expanded the scope of green energy target. So that's for members' information. The 30 years concerned, it'll take 30 years to recover the cost of district cooler systems or cooling system. Thank you, Chairman. Okay, 30 years to recover the cost. It's about cost effectiveness. In your appendix, Annex 6, 7, and 8 talks about A to C goals for energy efficiency. In Annex 6, it talks about the energy label, and also there is the building energy conservation, and the new topic now is the cooling system. Do we really have the need for so much manpower? You think there's a need, but I personally think that when the energy efficiency labeling system is in good progress, in your establishment, the chief engineers actually is supported by 5 other non-directorate staff at a cost of more than $9 million. 30 years excluding inflation, that comes to a huge amount or expenditure. So from Wuchiwai's perspective, so far we have post outside of the establishment, but in the long run, when we are well versed in the other 2 projects, then maybe manpower can be saved to support the efficiency work or energy efficiency work. For energy conservation, to us, it's a long-term sustainable work. So, Chairman just used the energy efficiency labeling scheme as one example that exactly shows our process of sustainability. The labeling scheme began in 2009. At the start, it only covered common and high energy usage equipment like air conditionings and so forth, air conditioners and so forth. But we are going to expand further the coverage of the labeling scheme to cover TVs, washing machines, even LED light bulbs or cooking equipment and so forth. And the energy saving standard of air conditioners in line with technological advancement will also tighten the criteria so as to take a two-pronged approach to expand the scope and also reduce energy even more and cut down on emissions. The work concerned should not stop at any stage, but we'd like to get your support. Energy efficiency is so important to tackle climate change. We need to increase our effort. Labeling system has been born, so thank you for your support. We have to make good use of the tool, expand the scope, and even make more effort to achieve better results. The building's energy efficiency ordinance is similar in that every 3 years we would discuss with the sector to see how we can further enhance the conservation standards. So this is a continuous progress or process. It requires a constant study evaluation so as to enhance the impact or level of conservation. We hope that we can get your support so that our energy saving work can be further enhanced. District cooling system in Kai-Tak, it saw good results. So now we are promoting energy conservation in infrastructural projects, and this is way gone beyond the labeling scheme. And also the buildings energy conservation ordinance makes it mandatory for buildings to conserve energy. So we need to also make further efforts in infrastructure projects. I hope that you can give us your support because this is something worth investing for the sake of Hong Kong. Yes, I agree, but just one more question. Who is doing for energy goal A and B and C? For A, there are about 100 people involved. A and B together, A, B divisions together should have about 150 staff because we have other kinds of support staff. I can't give you the exact number now, but I can give it to you if you want. How about for Division C in the future? Would you get tens of more staff later on? Well, with the restructuring, Division A and Division B, some staff could be redeployed so that we can create better results. So staff who are working in Division B and Division A may be transferred to Division C. Yeah, that's my point. Once you become well skilled, then they could be easily more, transferred to other posts. I totally support, your point, Director, of reducing emissions. But if you have experienced staff, then you can have better staff deployment and to save expenditure. I don't know if you have the 150 staff of Division A and B, then Division C, you need to think of the manpower. Yeah, Wu Chiwei, Director, I never asked you, please understand that I never asked you to stop. Energy conservation work is based on a consensus of the government and the electrical. You are actually doing DCS with the support of the legislation, but that's the basis. But my difference is, in opinion from you, is that you want to get a permanent post from us and get our approval for that. But my point is whether you can consider accepting my view that you can have a supernumerary post for 5 years, for example. So after for example, DCS system in Hongshouqiu is done, then for the future direction for energy conservation, once you have a clear idea, then you can then come back and get a permanent post approval. You need to convince us that the post itself actually needs or has justifications for being made permanent. I understand, of course, all of your work will continue to make improvements, but you cannot just say because you want to make continuous improvements to justify the creation of a permanent post. Now, I know there are some new districts that require DCS. DCS is unique in that once this framework is done, then the content is pretty standard, mainly about aligning or alignment and so forth. And you can leave that to executive staff, and you need not take over the work. I mean, your branch. So because there can be other divisions or companies that will carry out the actual work after the framework is developed. So I hope that you can accept my opinion. I think that, justifiably speaking, you should ask for money for supernumerary posts for 5 or 7 years. Quite a number of government posts actually have quite a long period for the supernumerary posts before the post concerned are made permanent with a good basis. Can you respond? 5 to 7 supernumerary posts first? Yes, for our work. Once we finish the design and get a contractor to make the installations, in the end, our department, the department needs to get contractors to get the system running. Besides having a stable supply of cool water, we also need to make sure that charges can be collected for the provision of water, cool water. So you need to make sure that the fees are collected. All these actually are the responsibility of EMSD. So for EMSD, we think that this would be a regular work. Once the design, installation, tendering, contract management, installation is done, the operation process is a continuous work. Therefore, there is a need for continuous work, and therefore there needs to be a permanent post. I totally understand your concern, however, how we can further improve the efficiency of the efficiency branch, that is, for example, through internal staff deployment to improve efficiency. That's our goal. But let me stress that the DCS in the 3 districts, in the coming 10, 20 or 40 years, there will be work created, and the effort of engineers will be much needed. Next one is Chair Wai Chin. Okay, for up on my previous question, the government's buildings in the past 4 years, well, 1 more year to go, before you reach the target of reducing electricity consumption by 5%. I hope that reducing electricity consumption doesn't mean that you would reduce the standard of power output. We don't want to see a shortening of air-conditioned periods. That's not what people want to see. So you have to expand your targets, not just reducing the power consumption alone. For private buildings, saving energy, reducing emissions is important. Offices, shopping malls have done a lot in terms of effectiveness. I think they can optimize their systems without compromising the standard of power supply. So let's take note that, as I just asked, the carbon emission and the auditing requires, resources to do the auditing, 200 odd buildings every year. So don't ignore the situation of private premises, because through improvement of systems or the use of changes in power supply or level supply at different times in shopping malls, that could have an impact on energy consumption. So how about the auditing of carbon emission? Can you answer my question on that? Thank you for the question. In the work of energy conservation, we always stress that, first of all, we need to have a body check to see whether a building per se has any areas that can be improved, like how through housekeeping, the situation can be improved. You know that for lifts or escalators, sometimes you need not have the lifts and escalators in operation all the time. So through better management, we can help the management company do a better job. And through the auditing, we can remind the management company to invest in engineering upgrade works. So we can see that LED lights are also popular in buildings. Why some management companies don't use LED lights? Because they don't know the investment concern, and the auditing exactly can provide them with the information to the manager or property management company to carry out a more effective management work. So during the auditing, we will get the government to take the lead in better using their facilities. Under the current ordinance, every 10 years, designated buildings are required to have an examination, and depending on the level of technology, whether existing buildings can upgrade their energy efficiency, that's something to be seen. In Hong Kong, we got more than 40,000 buildings, which actually make up an important part of our drive to enhance energy conservation. It's easier to install new facilities in new buildings, but for old buildings with their aged facilities and structure, how we can actually enhance the energy conservation in such an old setting that actually requires smart decisions. In the Annex 2 of the paper, as I said, it talks about the 30 years of usage period. It seems like the return period and the 30 years, any difference? Yeah, the 30 years refer to the period for cost recovery. For example, the DCS, we expect that with proper management, the system can be in use for more than 30 years. So therefore, 30 years is where we can recover the costs, but through appropriate management, the DCS can be extended for use. The use of it can be extended for beyond 30 years. So I just want to have a clarification, clear idea. So that means your expected period of use for the DCS should be beyond 30 years. Can we say that? Yeah, for civil engineering structures, it can even be used for more than 70 years. But for electrical and mechanical facilities like air conditioners, 20, 30 years will be a time when the machines need to be replaced. For old structures, the equipment can be used for longer. But whether the electrical and mechanical equipment is so old that it cannot be used at all, it just means that the aging equipment fails to meet the latest technology requirements. But we can upgrade them so that the DCS can still have optimal results and with proper conservation. So that in other words, 30 years, after 30 years, there still be maintenance costs. But you haven't shown us the cost for replacement maintenance. You haven't shown us the estimates, excluding inflation. What percentage of increase will there be in terms of maintenance and replacement costs? Can you give us some kind of indicators? Yes, I can. It's quite complicated. We have the operation and maintenance costs. I can give you the figures later on. Would you buy third round? 2 points? Oh, you have 4 minutes. I still think that the DCS, the concept concerned, involves new development areas, which after all actually is a dead-end world. So, because of the presence of new development areas which will last 20 years or more, and I don't think that's the justification for creating a permanent post. I can't buy that. And secondly, you caused me to think of the idea of energy efficiency. You said that the branch is responsible for examining government buildings. If you can recall, at this particular panel, I raised two cases. One, the Kai-Tak Tunnel, when it replaced the channels there. We had a long debate, and colleagues there insisted that the LED lights are not up to your endurance level, therefore they cannot be used. And then the entire project can only have 5% of energy conservation, and therefore you need to stick to the old style light bulbs. From the perspective of energy conservation, the decision made there, was it right or not? Because the energy efficiency branch already in existence. Look at electrical complex here. If you look up to the ceiling, we are actually wasting a lot of energy. From your perspective, I think let's not talk about private premises. If you were to examine government buildings, you have not done a good job.
市場上邊
Thirdly, in the private market, when we're looking into the changing of lighting, there's actually quite a strong market because you'll be able to cut down cost once LED lights are used. So you can maybe be only spending 0.2 kilowatt hour LED lights, and you'll be able to provide the same brightness. And it can also provide maintenance for a certain period of time. Therefore, from this perspective, the market is actually more advanced in energy efficiency measures. It has even exceeded what the government has done. From these examples, I feel that the paper contents are really not persuasive enough. Well, I'm just trying to compare what's in the market. Well, you can give me a response. I can say that I support a supernumerary post, but I would object to a permanent post. Mr. Wu, so he's raising the EDA because you can see that it's actually not saving a lot of cost, although it's not directly related to our paper here. We're talking about energy efficiency, and therefore he has brought up this topic. We don't want to see a post created, yet work is not done, and we lose track of what's happening. So how can you respond to paragraph 5 to 6 in Annex A? Chairman, we see new technology every day. The market continues reminding us that new technology is to be expected. We try to implement new technology from the government perspective. Well, sometimes we are quite quick, and sometimes we might be a bit slow. I would like to pledge to everyone that we will try our best to promote energy saving measures. This is something we can do. If I see there is a need for a post for the next 10 years, then I would propose a creation of a permanent post, because we need a professional to help us to promote our infrastructure. But this is something we can discuss further. Thank you. Can you enlighten us? I'm sorry, I'm diverting a bit here. How can EDA help us to cut down savings? Mr. Hu used the example of the Kai-Tak Tunnel. Do you actually have figures to show us? Can EDA really meet the targets? Otherwise, we keep on saying that we are managing energy efficiency, yet we are not meeting our target. Chairman, I can share with you some figures. In government buildings, every few years, we will set up 5 to 6 targets. From 2003 to 2007, we wanted to cut down 6%. We were able to reach 7%. And then 2009 to 2014, our target was 9. We were able to cut down 9.2%. In the 2015 till now, our target was to cut down 5%, and actually we're able to meet the target. So in the past few years, we're able to cut down 20% of energy consumption in government buildings, and we are going to look to meeting a 6% cut down in the coming years. I think we rank amongst the first in developed countries. The government has the responsibility to take the lead in cutting down energy consumption. We hope by 2025 we'll be able to cut down 40% of energy usage, and by 2017 we are already able to cut down by 31%. I think this is actually quite a good result in Hong Kong, and if necessary we can provide you with a report. I think we have shown very good results in the past few years. You talked about cutting down 31%. So what is actually, is it a kilowatt hour or what? Can you tell us how much carbon emissions we have reduced? Please provide us with all these figures so we'll be able to know exactly how much we're cutting down in a year and how much money we're spending on our 100 posts. How much money we have spent. If you can show us how many tons of emissions we have reduced and how much savings in terms of kilowatt hour, then it'll be able to help us to understand better. I think that we should benchmark it to see whether we can really achieve it and whether it has really helped us to reduce carbon emissions, so that by 2030 we'll be able to reach a certain target. Maybe it's a 3.5 kilotons per person by that time. Our chairman, well, actually, you are very familiar with what we do. We can use a figure which you have just mentioned, which is carbon emissions. Our government target is hope that by 2030 we'll be able to reduce 65% to 70% of the concentration of carbon emissions. We do have a working plan in which we need to set a target, and then we will measure our results every year. I can also provide these figures to you after the meeting. Mr. Hu, well, you have asked 3 rounds, and we have registered your view. You support a supernumerary post instead of a permanent post. Mr. Lo Wai Kwok, do you support it? Well, I have already expressed my support. Well, I know Mr. Tony Tse also supports it. We will take note of Mr. Hu Chi-wai's views and submit this to the ESC. And I hope that you'll be able to submit the additional information as soon as possible. Mr. Hu Chi-wai. Well, I'd just like to reiterate, I feel that we do need to create a post. We do need extra manpower. But then you are creating a permanent post here. And I don't want to continue to harass you when it is submitted to the US ESC. I hope that the director will consider this very carefully to see whether a permanent post is needed. Well, we want to carry out a harmonious discussion. I'm not objecting to the creation of a post. I just want it to be a supernumerary post so that there could be more performances to persuade me or persuade members of the public that there is a need for such a permanent post. We understand. Thank you, Director. The next agenda item, well, we are quite good on time. The next agenda item is further measures to improve air quality, Part 2. I would like to invite the administration to come in.
嗰個第一部分咧，即係12月嗰個會咧，就講咗電動車啊、空氣質素指標啊、清潔生產伙伴計劃、VOC 啊嗰啲咁樣。咁呢個會咧，我哋就集中以下喺個文件嗰啲嘅。歐盟4期係啦，如果委員問翻呢啲嘢咧，就可能要請佢哋，可能係即係因為時間有限啦。VOC 係咩？冇乜人 VOC 啊嗰啲咩？清潔。揮發性有機化咩 vaporize 乜鬼啊？乜嗰啲 low emission zone 就係嗰個巴士行嗰啲調配一啲低排放嘅巴士去嗰啲某啲行人嘅專用區嗰度。好。嗱，上次嘅重點係講咗呢兩個嚇。咁多謝你提醒我 ，thank you。拍出嚟用先，放喺度。其中一個咧，佢嗰咩？呢個新嘢嚟嘅，我哋未見。低碳綠色。嗰個基金咧，佢就交文件嚟嘅時候就話佢唔涉及財務建議嘅。明白。但係後尾佢有一句咧，佢就話會申請撥款嘅。所以可能要麻煩主席問幾多錢？想澄清下，係咪都會再嚟個 panel，然後先至撥款咧咁樣？因為佢內文冇講到佢嗰個撥款嘅詳情。Lovely。好，歡迎局長同埋你哋嘅同事。
Welcome. We are now discussing Part 2 of further measures to improve air quality. I know you have a PowerPoint to share with us. Thank you, Chairman. In the last meeting, we introduced a series of measures to improve air quality, which is Part 1, and now I'm going to touch on Part 2 because we do have a series of measures. In the paper, we want to phase out Euro 4 diesel commercial vehicles. These Euro 4 commercial vehicles actually emit huge emissions. We can see that it can be about 5 to 10 times respirable suspended particulates and nitrogen oxide, and therefore we suggest to phase out Euro 4 vehicles. We suggest to set it at 15 years as before, and that would involve around 40,000 Euro 4 vehicles. So 7.1 billion has been earmarked by the government as extra funding. We hope that by the Q4 of 2020, we'll be able to do that to try to clean up air pollution. We have actually discussed it with the sector on the and all the different providers, and they basically all agree to the phasing out of such vehicles. And there's also a pilot scheme for electric ferries. As you know, ferries emit lots of black smoke, and we're looking into electric ferries as actually the ferry routes are short and ferries move slower. We can only use it within in-harbor ferry routes. And so we are planning to start a pilot scheme for 4 ferry routes, and we are going to adopt it for 24 months, which is 2 years, and it's suggested that we would support the maintenance and expenses for charging facilities of these ferries. We estimate that total expense would be 350 million, and we hope to be able to begin this scheme in 2022 to 2023. And the next one is the pilot scheme for electric public light buses. We have tried to promote these, but then the current buses cannot really accommodate the needs of public light buses, and therefore we consulted a study to see what would be more suitable, and we hope to support about 40 electric public light buses to run on different fixed routes, and it would be a one-year pilot scheme. Our plan is to support PLBs and electric PLBs, of course, will be much more expensive. We're going to subsidize the difference in cost, and also to support the charging facilities. We hope the first electric PLB will start running in 2023. And we'll need to see whether there is a smooth commissioning of the bus. We are still discussing with the sector on the details, and therefore we do not have some fixed figures to share with us. We will update you on the figures after discussion with the sector. We're also going to review the Pilot Green Transport Fund. This actually supports a different transportation on new technology to try to reduce pollution. We want to change this name to be New Energy Transport Fund, because in the future, new energy transportation will not only be limited to electric vehicles. Therefore, we hope that by renaming the PGTF to the New Energy Transport Fund, it will encompass a broader scope. And there would also be a trial fund, and we're going to continue to come up with a new applied project. So if we see that some vehicles are already mature, we hope that through the fund we'll be able to promote wider use of these vehicles. And we will need a bit more money to try to promote it, and we suggest an extra funding of 800 million, which we'll hope to be able to start by the second quarter of 2020. Next, I'd like to touch on the Green Tech Fund, GTF. There are many green technologies adopted in Hong Kong. Through the setting up of a Green Tech Fund, we hope to promote green technology and reduce emissions. So we are going to support local research facilities. And of course, people would ask about the private R&D centers. We are now actively looking into whether this could also be extended to private local organizations, and then what kind of conditions will be able to support. We are still studying the possibility, and we will only come up with a decision after consulting the sector. We'll hope to speed up the setting up of this fund, and our goal is to accept applications starting from early 2021. So this concludes my briefing, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. 4 minutes each. 3 members who would like to ask questions. First is Mr. Yik Chi-ming, second Mr. Lo Kok Wei, and third Mr. Siu Ka-fei. Mr. Yik Chi-ming, thank you. I would like to ask about the phasing out of Euro 4 commercial vehicles. This was raised in a policy address of 2014, and the sector has been waiting for the compensation before they replace the vehicles. They have waited for a long period of time, and now it's 2020. So what has happened in between? Some of them who bought new vehicles were not able to sell off their old vehicles, and they're not able to get the parts they need, and so they're waiting for the government to try to promote it very soon. And after years of waiting, you're finally doing it. At the end of last week, I received 2 views. I hope that you would consider it. First, it's on the heavy lorry cranes. So the compensation right now is not enough. I hope that you will try to take care of their needs and reconsider it. And then for 4-wheel drives, I think this was raised last week. This model, Defender, has already stopped production. And the owners didn't want to dump the vehicle because they really liked their vehicle. Well, they registered as a commercial vehicle because for those that do not adhere to the emission target, then they can only be registered as a commercial vehicle. I think the government needs to consider to appropriately amend these old vehicles or these vintage vehicles so that owners can still keep their vehicles. They are not using it for commercial purposes. They actually want to keep their vehicles and then to take it on the road to run it every now and then. I hope that you'll be able to discuss with them to see how you can amend the current legislation so that they can continue to own their beloved vehicles.
And then about the ferries. You plan to subsidize them. I have talked to the trade, and they said that you told them that you have certain requirements on the speed and the number of passengers, and it seems that you have not come up with some proposals. So the sector is asking whether you can do away with the high-speed ferries, and then you can categorize the vessels into 3 categories. The beauty of this is, once, if in the future operators will cease their business, then the government can help her redeploy the vessels. If we can standardize the design, then it will do good to your redeployment of the ferries in the future. I'm happy to sit down together with the trade and you to discuss this, to make sure that we make the best use of public funds and to categorize the different vessels. I hope that you can also implement ASAP the PLB initiative. The green PLB is well positioned to try out electric PLBs. To a certain extent, is also feasible among taxis, but after all, it has to do with the provision of the charging facilities, and the trade is more than happy to discuss these issues with the government. Undersecretary, we are exploring with the taxi trade for feasible options, and once we've got some proposals, we'll report the same to you. And we are as concerned as you are with the PLB situation. If some PLB manufacturers can produce the electric PLBs as soon as, then we can speed up things as well. Ferries. We are happy to talk to the ferry companies on how to make the vessels which suit all. These vessels are often very tailor-made. How is the design like, the dimensions, and also the parts and so on, how they can be made to be suited for the ferry company's purposes. Ferry companies may differ in their demands on the design of the vessels. We have to talk further to them. As for 4-wheel drives, like I said, our objective is this. The Euro 4 commercial vehicles are emitting 5 to 10 times than non-Euro 4 commercial vehicles. So we would like to phase them out. We understand that some owners would like to keep their own vehicles. They cherish them very much. And maybe we can see how they can keep their cars under the existing mechanism. Maybe we need to amend the law. If the owners would like to keep them for daily use, then that might not be possible. We have to be fair. If we are phasing out the polluting vehicles, we should not allow these vehicles to exist anymore. So we can explore with them how they can go about keeping their cars. As for lorry cranes, we can further discuss that after the meeting. Well, we're talking just about fine-tuning of the plan here. So these issues will not have an impact on our overall plan. So if we can allocate the funding ASAP, that would be best for the trade as well as the environment. Can I add? Chairman, I would like to thank the Undersecretary for his positive response. On the issue of four-wheel drives, they have approached me recently and talked to me. And I think that for the present regulations on vintage vehicles, they have not been reviewed for a long time. We should advance with the times. In the past, we didn't set, say, a deadline for phasing out certain vehicles. In the past, now we are setting a deadline of 15 years for as a service life. And we must review the vintage vehicles regulations. Now, if they are included in the relevant regulations, they will be subject to restrictions. But right now, I think the restrictions are too stringent. Can we relax them a bit? They are just driving them for leisure, as I said. They're not putting those for daily use. So there is room for discussion indeed. Thank you, Undersecretary, for your positive response. We can further discuss that. Can I follow up? How many vintage vehicles are there? In Annex 1? Are they considered as commercial vehicles for registration purposes? Are they considered light goods vehicles, medium goods vehicles? I believe it's light. It's the number 3889. And we talk about, among the 23,000 vehicles, how many of them are vintage vehicles? Well, let me give you some more background about such type of vehicle. They are usually driven now by or powered by diesel. If we have to categorize them as private cars, and because of diesel vehicles is causing a lot of pollution, the regulations on diesel vehicles are very stringent, and they could not meet with them. Now, if they're registered as light goods vehicles, then they could meet with the DCV's requirements. So they are now registering as light goods vehicles. The number is around 700. So, Annex 3. So among the 234,888 number here, it's around 700. Is that right? Yes, around 700. Maybe Mr. Frankie Yick can pacify the vintage car owners and see how their needs can be met. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. I have received the submission from the Hong Kong Vehicle and Transport Concern Group raising questions about the diesel vintage four-wheel drives. My car has a four-wheel function. It is run on gasoline and not diesel. Before I reached this much submission, I didn't know that there were such diesel-driven four-wheel drives, and they're registered as DCVs for historical reasons. And I agree with Mr. Frankie Yick's concern. So can we look at whether we can do something about the vintage vehicle regulations to fix the problem? They're not commercial vehicles per se. No, I would like to ask the question about the PGTF, and that there would be a new category added, the applications for use. I have served as a member of the relevant committee on PGTF. My experience is that the government has been supporting substantially the trade to experiment with commercial vehicles being turned into electric vehicles. But the reality is that no matter how hard we try, not many commercial vehicles are suited to be turned into electric vehicles, EVs, and because of the hilly terrain in Hong Kong. Since we would like to add in a new category, a new section of applications for use to fund products which are mature and suitable for local use. Have you identified suitable vehicles that could really fall under this category? So that's my first question. Second question, about the use of EVs. I have had meetings with those from the trade, and we have asked the THB and the EMB representative secretaries to meet with us. Let's talk about what the reality and what specific measures that can be taken. And the trade talk about electric taxis and the electric PLBs. They face the same problem. The trade is willing to invest and experiment, but the charging problem cannot be fixed. You have this new pilot scheme for PLBs, electric PLBs. Can you resolve their charging problems in charging facilities? Can the chargers be installed at terminus or on the streets or pavements and so on? Well, they have asked for that, but then the relevant department refused to approve for their application. So how can you tackle this very specific problem on installing charging facilities? This is a question about the actual implementation. Thank you, Dr. Low, for sitting on the committee of the PGTF and for your support all along. Right now, we haven't been able to identify a PLB which is mature enough to be implemented. But if you look at the development, once the technology becomes mature, the developments can be very fast. If you look at electric buses and mini goods vehicles, well, very soon the technology will mature. So right now we have extended the scope of the fund so that it can cover the technologies once they have been developed. So we don't have to come back and seek for additional funding in the future. The member asked about the charging facilities for PLBs and taxis. The electric versions. We have carried out experiment on electric taxis, and the charging facilities didn't work that time. And some time has passed. We found that the quick charging technology is more mature now. And from a technical perspective, we are better positioned to work on this. The member asked about the, installation of the chargers and the modus operandi. We want to carry out a pilot to see how we can actually take this further in Hong Kong. Once experience is gained, then we can do it on a larger scale. So this will be the focus of our pilot scheme. So, like I said, we can manufacture the PLB sooner, then we can advance the timetable a bit from 2023. And what the crux of it lies with the speed in manufacturing the right PLB. We can talk to the trade about whether we can speed things up. Can I add? The most feasible charging location for PLBs is in their terminus. So if you can ask the relevant departments to relax their regulations so that the chargers can be installed in the terminus, then the problem can be resolved immediately. I hope that you can take a more pragmatic approach. I believe that the Undersecretary has heard your views. Mr. Peter Shiu, on phasing out Euro 4 DCVs, I have expressed my views in the last two meetings on behalf of the Automobile Association. They represent the CVs as well. They have held meetings with you, and I want to say that their concerns are very specific, but then they agree to the phasing out program. They support going green, and if subsidy is given, then the burden can be lessened. And for Euro 3 and Euro 4 vehicles, the replacement has to be done seamlessly. If that is not the case, then it will cause some problems with those in the maintenance service. Mr. Yik has already said something about this. I agree with the overall direction. About the four-wheel drive cross-country vehicles, like the two other members. This is the vehicle that they're talking about, the four-wheel drives. 2 days ago, those owners approached me, and if not for them, I didn't know that they fall into the category of Euro 4 DCVs. you consider them as DC commercial vehicles. And if they have not approached us, I would not know about this. And in the course of a phasing out exercise, they would be phased out altogether, and they could not drive them anymore. They would become useless. And from the environmental protection perspective, that's not good. They are using diesel indeed, but then we still have to be mindful about the use of resources. They are very pricey in overseas countries, and some of the models have not been produced anymore. So in your policy, how can you make sure that they will not be phased out altogether? This is subject to further discussion. The trade has also told me that all of them are not used as commercial vehicles. They're not delivering goods. They are for daily use. But that doesn't mean they're driving them on a daily basis. Most of the drivers have some other vehicles for their daily use. And in the mainland and in overseas countries, there are competitions. So they're using their vehicles for those purposes, and they're not using them frequently. So the owners also knows about the government's policy. So let's try to find the middle of the course approach so that they will not stand in the way of your environmental protection policy, yet they can still be allowed to exist. So we're talking about 700 vehicles, taking up 0.1% of the entire vehicle fleet in Hong Kong, and they're not used on a daily basis either. So Mr. Yik asked whether exemption can be made to them as they can we categorize them as a special purpose vehicles or vintage vehicles? And for special purpose vehicles, some of them are powered by gasoline. So can exemption be allowed, granted to them? Of course, you can impose certain conditions like limiting the time that they are being driven, and also when they go out of Hong Kong, should certain conditions be imposed upon them as well. So if you impose all these conditions, then that would be good enough for them, and you can allow them to still own and drive their car. Chairman, I will still allow some time for the Undersecretary to respond. Thank you, Mr. Shiu, for your comment. We understand what you said. Like I said, for that kind of four-wheel cross-country vehicles, and they cannot be registered as diesel private cars. So they are registered as diesel commercial vehicles now. Like I said, well, if they reach a service life of 15 years, they have to be phased out. But if we allow them to be used still, that might not be fair to other vehicles. But I know that they have been used for special purposes, and there's a value of keeping them. We know that. So maybe within the government, we can liaise with the Transport Department to see how registration can be done in other ways to allow them to exist still. Chairman, maybe I can arrange for a meeting with you for you to meet them. So do you mean a public hearing? Can we arrange a public hearing? If yes, then they can also relay your views to them. Maybe if we don't have sufficient time, we can hold a meeting among government departments, myself, and the car owners, so to let us know their views on how they can still exist. So there have been so many policies and measures proposed. What are the effective or the benefits? Well, we're talking about air quality now. Now, what about there are 4 ferry companies in Hong Kong, and later on, the walk-to taxi service will be provided from Central to Hong Kong. So we should be target-oriented. You talk about funding would be allocated to them to run the ferry routes on a pilot basis, and some $350 million will be allocated. Is there a timetable? On land, we have several PLBs. Now, 40 PLBs to be designated in the pilot scheme. So when will the pilot scheme end? Well, it's like buses. We said that we should be taking forward the bus initiative, but there are so many nitty-gritties to be sorted out, loose ends to be sorted out, and it's no progress has been made. Do we have a specific timeline? Well, for diesel vehicle, the deadline is 2027. 78,000 have been worked on, and there are some 30,000 to be worked on. So when are you going to do that? So when will you work on all the commercial vehicles? When will you what is your timetable for the ferries? And what is your timetable for the electric buses as well? Give us some answers on those so that we know that we are spending funding value for money. And you also asking for a green tech fund, and you are proposing to increase the fund from 300 million to $800 million. In your annex, you mentioned about researchers that are also covered under the fund. Do we have the right talents? Do you have the right universities in mind which can take up all these projects? If we talk about private organizations, are you imposing any standards? I'm just worried that funding may be allocated, but we're not achieving the desired results. So I would like to know more about the timeline, and also how would you gauge the effectiveness of the use of the funds?
Chairman, let me give you the details now. At the last meeting, we talked about that every 5 years we review the air quality indicators, and the next day will be 2025. Behind the review is also a package of measures to improve quality. By 2025, we are confident that we would reach the new meet the new standard. And then we'll have the second review. By 2030, we will set new targets and see what measures can be undertaken to reach the goals by then. So we have two types of measures in the pipeline. One is that whether they are technically feasible, and then we can actually use the measures to reduce air pollution. The second type of measures, as we talk about today, involves technological aspects. We want to launch tests and pilot schemes to ascertain or identify technology, for example, within minibuses or ferries, that when at the mature stage, they can be included as part of our emission reduction policies, so that in the days ahead we can continue to improve the air quality. So just like you mentioned that we'll phase out Euro 4 vehicles, that's for sure can be undertaken on a large scale. That is to phase out 40,000 diesel vehicles by 2017, before 2027. For electric ferries, we hope that there can be a 2-year pilot scheme. By 2025, hopefully it can be done. By then we can decide whether condition is ripe for using electric ferries on a large scale. Same for electric minibuses. By 2025, we should have an idea what decision to be made. When the conditions are right, then we will, in the next stage of planning, carry on with our carbon emission work. Even though the paper doesn't mention buses, but the number of bases is quite big. We discussed it before. What is the target in relation to buses? We are testing tens of electric single-decker buses, but it's a pity that right now it seems like the results of the tests aren't that favorable. So we feel that we need more time to explore the use of electric buses for single-deckers, that is, I think technology for that is more mature. We'll carry out more tests for that. But for double-deckers, even though they are mainstream in Hong Kong, but for double-deckers that are electrically run, we still haven't found a model that suits the Hong Kong context. So now, together with bus companies, we are discussing to see whether we can design the framework or specifications for double-decker in Hong Kong and then discuss with the manufacturers. But we don't know the exact time frame for that yet. Okay. I think in the north of Shenzhen River, all things are possible, but south of Shenzhen River seems like problems abound. We have hilly terrain, so it's like electric buses. I think Hong Kong, we may be facing the biggest problem with the launch of electric buses. Is a mystery to me. Yes, I see what you mean. I can see your points, but let me share that. I understand how Shenzhen government does it. For example, in Shenzhen, there are more than 200 charging stations for buses. Every station is the size of half a soccer pitch. So Hong Kong cannot adopt the model in Shenzhen because of the space limitations. And secondly, the buses in Hong Kong, technology is similar, but when it comes to the design of the buses, they are not designed for a densely packed urban area like Hong Kong and also with hilly slopes. So the buses, when they are used in Hong Kong, the performance would differ from those used like on the mainland when there are lots of plain areas. Next one, Yik Ji Ming, 4 minutes. I don't need to use about 4 minutes. As I said, the replacement of Prio for commercial vehicles, quite a lot of people are anticipating them. And because that would affect their household income. And they have been without any pay. If there's no objection today, your subsidy plan, I would suggest that in relation to the plan, please tell the Financial Secretary to include that in the budget so that by May it can be approved instead of us putting it forward separately to FC, because otherwise it will take a long time and people in those families may starve to death. So please incorporate it in the budget. Thank you. I will discuss it with various government departments. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I think this is a paper for you to take note of and to help you be aware of the progress of the measures to improve air quality. Okay, Ted Hui next, sorry, Ted Hui. Okay, you're right to speak now. First round, 4 minutes. I'm concerned about the Green Tech Fund, the relaxation of the criteria for it. The Green Transport Fund, you can see from the paper that 2011, in the past 8 years, if I got it right, there are only 180 cases, very small in number. That's why you impose a review. But I think the review has come too late, and the resources allocated to the tune of $100 million is too limited. Now you're going to relax the criteria so more sectors can take part. Of course, I welcome it. But I know that the fund itself, there's a quota for applications, particularly for number of applications and total number of test products. Is it right? Are there any changes to those numbers? Please tell me. Is it because of the quota that gives large companies that actually pose constraints to large companies, yet for SMEs which do not have the admin manpower to fill all the forms, they dare not try applying. So, like for the application for tests, like for taxis, only 2, the cap is only 2 for 3 products. It's a small number. So is there any case for any ground for relaxing the restrictions? Why keep at this level? I think after the review for technical amendments, I would ask Assistant Director Mr. Ho to explain to you. Thank you. As for your question, in the Pilot Green Transport Fund, there's a cap for For each applicant, there's a cap on the amount applied for. In paragraph 3.3, the cap is $12 million. So it's not really a small amount. For each case of application, maximum is $9 million. So for the average electric vehicles, I think the subsidy amount is quite big. But for the 9 million cap, it will be increased to $10 million because some new cars may need quick charging. So my understanding is that you would increase the amount, but the number of cases remain the same. Because for some companies, they may not be able to find more effective or efficient car types, so they can apply for 20. But because of the number of cases allowed, they cannot, get that many trials. Well, in the past, when we set up the fund, we consider the number of cases. But the vehicles themselves, because they're on an experimental basis, they can't. When we don't want an applicant to apply for support for too many types of vehicles, because if it's a test vehicle and if it doesn't work, and if you give them 5 or 6 trials, then they may all not work. So therefore, we need to put the cap on the number of models to be tested. So for taxis, maximum 2. So that rule still remains, right? Would it be too few? So many taxis around, even if you give them 20 cases, that would not affect the operation. Are you being too rigid? In the past, when we decided on the number of cases, we looked at the type of vehicle and the chances of it being used. We don't want to see that an applicant monopolizes the trials. So we want to see more people applying and trying out more models. But experience told you that it's reviewed by the figures. Not many people did come forward. So I hope that for the number of cases and the cap on the types of products, they should be relaxed so that you would reap benefits from it as well. Okay, please consider my view. Okay. Under Secretary, please get your colleagues to think about the idea. Okay, I have a follow-up question. In paper 3646, paragraph 46, it talks about the financial implication. That is, the Green Tech Fund will involve initial preparatory work. What is your latest plan before submitting to the FC for the consideration? I think we need to consult some external parties first before we can come up with some estimates. But for our initial thoughts, I'll ask Mr. Al, the Deputy Director, to take you through our initial thinking for the Green Technology Fund. Yes, the fund is intended to promote carbon emission and also scientific research in the area. We hope that we can be more focused in the scientific research for carbon emission, and that we're aiming for a higher amount of subsidy and also for a longer time frame so that the sector can apply. We want to target public scientific research organizations in Hong Kong to see. We're also looking into how we can involve private sector. So we will have to consult the sectors first before we can lay down the details. Deputy Director, this sort of fund, GTF, apply in relation to Applied Science Technology Fund. Do they overlap, you think? Because I think the government has different similar funds. This is a Green Tech Fund. But on the whole, I've seen like our Science and Innovation Bureau, they have similar funds. Have you reviewed in setting up new funds? Have you considered whether there's any overlap with existing funds? And would you activate some funds or other funds which may be run by other departments? So I don't want to see too many overlapping layers, and lacking focus. What do you think? Actually, with other bureaus, we have discussed the matter, And exactly, we have found that for the low carbon green technology development worldwide, it is of increased importance. But out of the many existing funds, they have a broad scope and they have all sorts of priorities. And we think that existing funds actually are not enough to support the green tech development. Therefore, we see the need for GTF to reduce carbon emission. I'm sure that we will make sure that there will not be overlap because we just want to concentrate the resources on this particular area. So definitely we'll make sure that there will be no overlapping. But if there is this low carbon emission GTF, we can see that we can provide support for those in need. So, Under Secretary, when this item has got more details and when you come back to us after your please, before you come, do an internal inquiry. Make sure that you actually are not overlapping what other government departments are doing. So please consult other government departments and try to have a scanning of all the funds offered by government departments and see which actually could also relate to the issue of carbon emissions. So that will be easier for us to make decisions. And also when you go to FC, people would ask you, why this amount? And you haven't told us the amount today. You can't tell us yet. But I think if you get more details and do more research, then you can be in a better position to answer questions. And then you'll be better thought out in using the money for the fund. That would be a better approach. Yes. We did coordinate with various government departments. I asked Mr. Ao to further explain. Yes, I'm responsible for the GTF, and my colleagues are involved in Innovation and Scientific Development Fund. So we are also involved in a cross-departmental platform where we can coordinate with various departments offering different funds. And we've done some reviews, and we found that the low-carbon GTF would not overlap with other funds because it really aims at satisfying the needs of the sector, particularly for downstream research. This is what is needed. In our Environment and Natural Protection Fund, we know that there's a need for dedicated funding for promoting technology to achieve low carbon emission. That's a gap now that we are trying to fill. And also in terms of operation, there won't be any overlapping because we have a cross-departmental platform under which various government departments would sit down regularly for discussion and communication. So we know who's doing what and we ensure that there'll be no overlapping. And after the review, we feel that this fund would meet the current needs and help drive scientific development and research in low carbon emission. Okay, yeah, once you've got more information, you may provide us with them and to let us have a better view, better idea of what you are trying to do. Because now the details are not really shown in your paper. So once you've got the information, please include them in your paper next time. Next one, Kenneth Lang. Thank you. I want to ask about the electric minibus pilot scheme. My feeling is that for the electric public light buses, it's not something new. My impression is that, like in the case of electric buses, in 2012 when I first became an electrical member, lots of pilot schemes were undergoing, and 8 years have passed, and for buses and minibuses, now you have the taken on electric public light buses. You say that you would subsidize a 40 EPL bus running on various routes for a 12-month trial each. You want to subsidize these PLBs. I think in comparison with buses, PLBs, particularly for green minibuses, their charging requirements would be much less. So after you finish the pilot scheme, can you be more transparent and tell us what indicators would you use to judge whether it's feasible or not? If yes, when would you implement it? Because for EPLBs, we've talked about it for a long time, many years. And last year, there is at an air and electric buses seminar. Some overseas experts told me that maybe EPLBs is more matter of supply and demand. Because in terms of suppliers, those which can provide suitable EPLBs for Hong Kong are few in number. Is that right? If that's the case, then what plan have you got to overcome the problem? Under Secretary, I think I can ask Mr. Ho later on to supplement. As I mentioned just then, in terms of distance from reaching maturity, I think EPLBs are closer to mature stage. You're right. In terms of suppliers, that's an important factor we have to look at. So besides overseas manufacturers, we're also looking at a local company that could manufacture EPLBs. If it's successful, that's what we want to see, to have local supplier. For actual details, what we're going to test and when is an appropriate time to launch them, I'll ask Mr. Ho to explain.
咁講而家其實
Undersecretary, can you tell us how many suppliers are for such electric public light buses so as to give us a concept? Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. Electric PLB is not anything new. The earliest one came out in 20 years ago, which was manufactured by a local company. But then it was not very successful. In the past few years, we have seen electric buses. Therefore, of course, there are also electric PLBs. There are a few companies providing EPLBs. In Hong Kong, we are unique in a way that we still have PLBs. There's only basically one supplier for PLBs in Hong Kong, but for EPLBs, there are a few suppliers. They are mainly manufactured on the mainland. And there are also EPLB companies in Europe. Through the Green Transport Fund, there's already a subsidy for the trade to acquire EPLBs for trial. PLBs can run 300 kilometers a day. For EPLBs, when it's fully charged, it can run around 100 odd kilometers, even less when the AC is on. Not many PLBs have parking spaces during nighttime, and therefore it is difficult for them to recharge. Right now, the EPLBs are charged overnight with a regular charging facility. So it means it's slow charge. However, if we are able to provide daytime charging, which means supercharging for them, it would be much better. We need to provide a fast charging model for PLBs, because not all PLBs can be parked at night. They may only be able to charge about 10 to 20 minutes a day at the bus stop, and that can help them run tens of kilometers. We are trying to develop this time. And we'll need facilities that can support fast charge batteries. There are already very few PLBs, and for fast charging PLBs, it's an even lesser number. We know that there's a company in Hong Kong looking into such battery. There's also one on the mainland, but they may not be manufacturing PLBs. So we have found a consultancy to help us look into fast charging facilities and batteries, so that with new technology we'll be able to provide fast charging at the PLB termini. So maybe by charging 10 to 20 minutes, it'll be able to run for extra tens of kilometers. We are now trying it out. Otherwise, it wouldn't be feasible for us to start with the EPLBs. Chairman, I just want to follow up. Well, you can already supply fast charging at PLB termini. Is it mature? Let me just talk about power supply and not the battery for now. Can the highways department or the EMSD, can you already provide support for fast charging facilities? Oh yes, we are going to study this. There is already PLB routes mainly in Kwun Tong, in which 3 fast charging spaces have been drawn out. So you will need a space to put in a charging module. It's actually sort of like a switchboard. It's about 2 meters times 1 meters. And so there's at a certain height, we already have allocated 3 spaces to provide charging facilities. So this is actually our trial point. The operators are also very interested. As the Undersecretary said, we hope to start the trial as soon as possible. If there are no other questions, let us move on to the next agenda item, which is on receiving public views on promoting the use of electric vehicles. 49 have enrolled in this session, but only 13 to 14 have shown up for now. So let's begin at 4:25. Let us take a brief rest.